Welcome everyone to Wrasslin Raw!
Listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when the World Wrestling Federation developed a little bit of an attitude. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
Nobody cares about 8 old farts getting that trophy handed to them.
Joe Giammatteo.
You dumb hillbilly.
I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett, and we are going to examine WWE history one episode of Raw at a time. In this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be talking about the Raw that aired on October 28th, 1996. This Raw was recorded at the War Memorial Coliseum in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and features Vince McMahon, Jerry the King Lawler, and just oh so briefly, Jim Ross on commentary. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Ready.
All right, then. Let's get into it. This is what Stone Cold did to his alleged best friend, Brian Pillman. And we got a scene of Stone Cold Steve Austin stomping on Brian Pillman's ankle while said ankle is trapped in a folding chair. Yes, that's right. Friendship and the betrayal of friendship is where we start off. Tonight, we're also going to have interviews with Bret the Hitman Hart, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Shawn Michaels will be taking on his old nemesis, the British Bulldog. There is no mention of fornication here, or hers, either. It's all on Monday Night Raw, and we start our first match of the night. The real Double J, Jesse James, defeats Sal Sincere by pinfall in 4 minutes and 14 seconds. Vince reminds us that this is not the Gong Show, just in time to pitch to the scenes of Jesse James in Iraq. And it's funny to me because milking the patriotism angle, that would have made me immediately start banging the gong to get this shit going. Jesse James came out to With My Baby Tonight. And there were people in the crowd singing along. It kind of amazed me how soon and how quickly Jesse James is over with this crowd. This is the first time for us seeing him in the ring since he's coming back. Sal Sincere was already relegated to jobber duty here. We didn't get to see his entrance, and he was already out and waiting for Jesse James. Lawler takes a moment to make fun of Italian Americans, and I thought of you both at that point, but Lawler only did that after Vince McMahon deliberately teed it up for him twice. Had to make sure to get that racial profile.
Trim the grass, polish the ball.
Mm-hmm. Some of the work in this was pretty good, but Jesse James was definitely more Road Dogg here than Jesse James. There was the old proto crotch chop, as in DX, but without the X. There was a lot of quick work that was maybe a little too quick, showing some overexcitement mixed with being a little green still on Jesse James' part. The showboating was constant, however, and it's no wonder that Jesse James ended up with Billy Gunn and being a success there. Their energy is almost exactly the same. As a matter of fact, the showboating got kind of annoying for me. It needed to be dialed back just a little bit. But that's just my opinion, and I am a nitpicking dickbag because the sound in the arena indicated that the crowd was loving it. Jesse James managed to get in a pump handle slam to finish this up, getting the pin and the 3 count. They gave us a little more of Jesse James afterwards, there working the crowd, milking what he could out of it. Guys, this was a really interesting match for me, and gets back to what I mentioned last week. It's getting harder and harder to not compare some of this to the future. You know, knowing what the future holds for Jesse James, it was hard to not think of him as a new age outlaw here. That being said, though, this match felt understandably green, but with hints of where he's going to go. Joe, what did you think of our show opener and the reboot of Jesse James here?
I agree with just about everything you said there. I like that he comes out to the With My Baby Tonight song. I think that's a nice touch. The whole thing with they bring up the Desert Storm service that he was doing, and I feel like that's probably that's probably Vince and Bruce kind of clashing on what's going on here. Like, if they're going to do that, do it separately from this country music singer thing. It just doesn't really make any sense because the patriotism angle is something that you would do totally separate from this comedy country singer thing. So it just...
Unless you're Lex Luthor.
It clashes pretty bad. But hey, whatever. I mean, maybe we'll just forget about that part and kind of just let him do his thing. Which hopefully that's what they do because like you said, he's showboating, he's strutting, he's dancing, he's really hamming it up with the crowd here more so than having a quality match. And I'm okay with it because it's Sal Sincere on the other side. I mean, if it's someone like Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart, then, I kind of think some of that stuff would slow down a little bit, hopefully. So we'll see what happens. I like that Vince accidentally called him Double J Jeff Jarrett when it started. That was nice. This was okay. I'm looking forward to what happens in the future with Double J Jesse James.
So to pick off one of your last comments there, I loved after Vince McMahon fucked up and called him Double J Jeff Jarrett, the King immediately pounced on it and made it known and pointed it out, and Vince McMahon just, yeah, I know, like trying to brush it off. So got to give props to the King for taking him to task there for it. But I thought this was a very good debut outside of the slightly awkward, is he a country singer? Is he a soldier? I mean, obviously he's both is what they're trying to say, but the action between the two was pretty solid. I mean, Sal Sincere, he definitely got the jobber treatment here, and I was contemplating on giving him Jobber of the Week because, I mean, he was clearly being jobbed out here.
Yeah.
But Vince was still trying to talk him up like this was going to be a very hard-fought victory for Double J if he were to pull it off. The last time we saw him, he put up a fairly long match with The Undertaker, so he's just one match off of that. I feel like I need to see a pattern. I need to see a few just clear job outs of Sal Sincere, and then he'll get the honors. But that's, I'm sure, coming very soon. As far as the match goes, though, as I stated at the beginning, a very solid introduction for Jesse James here. I enjoyed him doing the Double J strut in the ring. We do learn that Brian Pillman is going to need more surgery, and they tell us he may never come back. There's a little hint as to where the future, unfortunately, is going to look for Brian Pillman, and that really is a shame because everything we've seen him do so far has been really good. It's just a shame we're never going to see him in the ring. But the match ended. I thought Jesse James' finisher looked good. The whole time we have Sal Sincere playing up his gimmick as Italian guy. I guess he's doing okay with that. All around, I thought it was a decent first match.
Yeah, I mean, the goal here, obviously, was to get Jesse James over, and it fucking worked on all levels. So the little things that I found annoying aside, the crowd was very much into him, and that's what matters here. So kudos to them, and a decent way to start off the show, too, I might add. We move along from there to the Karate Fighters Survivor Series pitch. Doc Hendricks is here, and he's pumped. He can barely hold back the jitters as he describes the upcoming Survivor Series weekend. Thankfully, though, it doesn't last as Stone Cold Steve Austin interrupts, telling Doc that nobody cares about a bunch of old farts and that Doc needs to get to introducing Stone Cold. Doc acquiesces and goes to the match card, describing Shawn Michaels and, I quote, good friend for now, Psycho Sid, and their upcoming match.
Friendship.
There. Yes, friendship. We get a preview of some of the Survivor Series teams in their first matchup. One team consisting of Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Crush, Goldust, and Jerry Lawler being escorted by Mr. Perfect by the looks of things. And the other team consisting of the Stalker, the Mild Man, Mark Marrow, Mark Henry, the Valet Sable, and I quote, WWF rookie Rocky Maivia. And we get a picture of him in that terrible outfit on the screen there. We're also going to get to see The Undertaker versus Mankind in a cage high above the ring.
Paul Bearer high above the ring.
Paul Bearer was in the cage high. Yeah, so I wasn't sure what the hell they were talking about, and I didn't really get it, obviously, with the way that I incorrectly did my notes.
So it sounds like it's a Shark Tank match?
Yeah, Shark Tank match with Paul Bearer. Out of nowhere, though.
Yeah.
I think this kind of goes back to what I stated during the Buried Alive pay-per-view, in that they wanted the Executioner to kind of, have a brief feud with The Undertaker, but they immediately dropped that when it was clear he couldn't go anymore. So I think they had to pivot and they just made some match with Mankind again.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it, but at the same time, if I'm Paul Bearer, I'm not voluntarily getting into a cage. I don't know. Stuff like that just kind of stretches my credulity a little bit. Definitely a strange thing to throw out there, and as you said, the first time we are hearing of that, so we'll see what else comes of it in the lead up to Survivor Series. Stone Cold comes back out, though, when his match with Bret Hart gets mentioned, and once again, more cussing and swear words in this short encounter than in 3 years of Monday Night Raw combined. Still to come, Bret Hart, and we get a nice scene of Bret playing with a pussy, as well as Stone Cold accosting a makeup person. For the record, he had a nice good-looking cat there in his lap. And this is where this segment ends. Joe, please, what did you have on the way that we're featuring Stone Cold during this pitch for Survivor Series?
I guess this is our new Doc Hendricks cocaine jam, right? Talking about Survivor Series, which is cool because we get some information on what type of matches we're going to see and more TV time for Rocky Maivia. So the Survivor Series is not the first time we see his face, which is something I did not realize until now. So we saw him last week during Brett's interview, and then we see him on the screen again this week. So that's pretty cool. The stuff with Stone Cold, I mean, you mentioned the cursing, more cursing than we've seen in the last 3 years on Raw, but it seems like they're being very careful with it. All he's saying is he's going to kick everybody's ass. And to me, it's like there's a little bit of overusage of it. Like, I feel like Stone Cold Steve Austin is still kind of trying to find his groove. I think there's a little bit of like overacting a little bit, but I'm not saying it's bad, but I just think he's still trying to kind of find that groove, kind of shed that Iceman gimmick and go into the Texas Rattlesnake.
I'd agree in that he doesn't quite have the Texas Rattlesnake gimmick there, especially in the facial reactions he makes to things. To me, I think that was the thing that stood out the most. But even with that, the only thing I could come away from in this segment, and this is going to be an ongoing theme today, is Stone Cold kind of stole the whole segment. He came in here, was throwing out some pretty good promos, and to me, it was like, oh, this was just all about Stone Cold. I didn't give a fuck about Survivor Series,
Yeah, completely agreed. And that's kind of the message that I took away from this, too, is that the Survivor Series pitch was just a convenient vehicle for Stone Cold to interrupt here. And Joe, I think you made a great point about Stone Cold just trying to find himself. I didn't pick up on that until later on, which I will get to in my notes. But yeah, that was something that stood out in this episode to me as well. Something that doesn't really stand out and shouldn't ever is our next match. Crush with Clarence Mason defeats Aldo Montoya by pinfall in 2 minutes and 41 seconds. Things kick off right with the mild man Mark Marrow joining commentary over the phone, and it was suitably mild. Aldo Montoya came out and got pyro, although the cameras wouldn't show it.
I need to know why. He got a full entrance with pyro.
Yeah.
Like he got his entrance music coming down the aisle and getting full pyro.
The only thing I could guess is that they bought all of his firework displays on bulk and to save money, and they got to use them up now.
It's so strange to me.
Well, my takeaway from it is that if Aldo is getting pyro, all is right in the universe. The conversation with Marrow went on too long. I was especially disgusted by Lawler trying to shoehorn Sable into the conversation. Something to do with jealousy. I tuned that out pretty damn fast. But then Jim Ross joins commentary, and although we still hadn't seen him yet as of this point, of course, the first thing that happens is they make a comment about whether his microphone is working. JR bitches about finally being introduced, and I was glad that it wouldn't be lasting long. So far, there hadn't been much of a focus on the match in the ring. That's just as well because there wasn't much happening there. We got the news that Farouk has retained Clarence Mason as his manager and that there will be big changes with Farouk. Here's hoping that's true. Those are a couple pieces of a puzzle that I'm looking forward to seeing in the future there. Then out of nowhere, we end up at the finish, which was just as well, but it's the heart punch that gets applied directly to the forehead instead of the heart, getting Crush the pin and the 3 count. Jim Ross continued bitching throughout all of this match. And the news here as we're exiting this match is that Crush hates being called Jailbird. And coincidentally, a whole bunch of people just right there around the entryway have plain white signs with black lettering that says just Jailbird on it. Almost looked as if they were made backstage and handed out to the people right before this match.
No, that's absurd. No. Don't make an accusation.
You're right.
Stop
I
it.
shouldn't say that. But this enrages Crush, who pulls a security guard over the rail, proceeds to beat the poor guy until officials come out and pull him off. Ryan, there were a lot of things going on in this match, very few of them wrestling. What did you think of it?
Well, I mean, Crush is involved, so it was pretty
Match
bad.
of the year? Oh, bad. Okay.
Not just Crush. Crush is involved, and we start off with Mark Marrow on the phone. I can't think of a worse way to start a match off, to be honest with you. And Mark Marrow, he's pissed off, and for some reason, he turned into Bobcat Goldthwait here. That was all. That's what he sounded like on the phone.
Who
to
did?
me. Mark Marrow. Mark Marrow on the phone sounded like Bobcat Goldthwait to me. Go back and listen to it. He like morphed into him for a few seconds during this.
Do you call him Goldthwait? Isn't his name Goldthwait?
Goldthwait, yeah. There you go. I haven't thought about that guy since fucking Police Academy 2, so sorry if I got his name wrong.
Rightfully so.
But the match was, they didn't really pay attention to it because, I mean, why would you? But I will give Aldo a little bit of credit here. Aldo did his best to sell for Crush. There were a few points where Aldo was coming off okay. You know, sadly, Crush did not return the favor at all to the Man of War, though. I mean, he just didn't really sell anything well, and some of his moves looked okay, but when he was supposed to be selling, it looked bad. And then, boom, the match is over, and like I have stated many times, if I wouldn't have given Aldo Montoya the Jobber of the Week many, many weeks ago, he would have earned it here. The whole shit with Jailbird after. I mean, Bartlett, I realized that was probably your favorite segment, but I didn't really like it.
It'll be his highlight.
It's his highlight for sure. But a piss poor way to end a bad match.
Well, with complex storytelling like this, how can it not be the highlight?
Compelling argument.
Yeah, all of this was terrible. I mean, you get Crush, then you get Aldo's full entrance with Pyro. And then you get Mark Marrow on the phone. Very mild. It's like asking Taco Bell for hot sauce and they accidentally gave you mild sauce. Man, this Jailbird stuff is kind of hilarious, really, to be honest. Like, knowing Crush's personal life at this time.
Well, I mean, it's like Jake the Snake, right?
Yeah, right. But
yeah, this is a soft version of exploiting Jake's substance abuse issues.
But clearly planting these signs is just, I don't know, it just seems so forced.
Just all a black magic mark on a white piece of paper.
Yeah, they all look the same, yeah.
They didn't even go out of their way to make them look good.
They were cue cards. It was literally cue cards that they pulled from backstage.
Yeah, they weren't even the normal size poster board.
Yeah, and the people that were holding them were like, they were just like standing there. They weren't like showing any expression.
No, they should have just had a shirt that said plant with an arrow on it.
Beating up that security guard Plant, though, I thought that was kind of funny.
It was.
But, I mean, outside of that, yeah, this whole thing was the shits.
Match of the year candidate. No, not really. But let's take a quick look at something better, slightly better. Something that happened last week when Hunter Hearst Helmsley, quote-unquote, injured Mr. Perfect before they were revealed as being in cahoots with each other. We got a repeat of the finish to that match where Hunter won the Intercontinental title. It was a nightmare for Sable. On Superstars yesterday morning, though, it was revealed that Mr. Perfect has been suspended indefinitely by Gorilla Monsoon. Therefore, we will not be seeing Mr. Perfect in the ring anytime soon.
You don't say.
Who would have thought?
He was just ready to make his comeback.
Yeah.
Stone Cold is there hanging around at what appears to be like an interview backstage set type area. He's getting impatient, but we'll get to him soon. First, though, we have to go to Todd Petting Zoo and see the first round of the Karate Fighters
You mean
tournament.
the Toddster.
God damn it.
Karate Fighters Tournament. Mr. Perfect versus Phineas I. Godwin in the first round. This became a cartoon segment. Mr. Perfect distracts Phineas. We find out that next week Sid will be taking on Marlena, which, I mean, I'm kind of interested in that just to see how Marlena does the gimmick as this cartoon fighter situation. I mean, it's stupid, don't get me wrong, but
hopefully she's wearing something low cut and gets some of that Sid baby oil on
That's
her.
what I'm
Yes.
guessing is going to happen, yeah.
She'll get sprayed. Also next week, we'll be checking in live via satellite from Brian Pillman's home. And now, just real quick, we're going to go to Stone Cold Steve Austin backstage, and Stone Cold lets us know that Stone Cold will be the one attending the Crippled Freaks party at his house. That's a direct quote, so we're looking to have Stone Cold maybe drop in and visit Brian Pillman at home next week.
That's absurd.
I can't imagine,
No.
I can't imagine that going that far or
They're
being
just,
anything.
They're just going to
noteworthy.
have a nice discussion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like mature adults.
Yep.
Then we get a view of Superstars again. The section of Superstars that was given to us here was when Stone Cold was verbally berating Brian Pillman in the ring. And after interrupting Stone Cold or some kind of flimsy plot device, Austin ends up attacking Pillman, putting his foot in that chair, as we talked about earlier. Pillman ended up getting hauled out in an ambulance. That is until Stone Cold showed up to stop the ambulance. Climbed into the cockpit, took the keys out of the ignition, and then just threw them across the backstage dock area or whatever. That was kind of an entertaining spot, I thought. Pillman is going to be getting a house call, according to Stone Cold. Austin drops the DTA for us, don't trust anybody. Austin then calls out Vince, calls out Gorilla Monsoon as Vince's puppet. And after a commercial break, we come back to a split screen with Austin on one side and Bret Hart on the other side. But this was a clusterfuck. Austin was making disparaging noises. Bret Hart was fuzzy and muffled. And then in the background, cartoony stripper music was playing with the voiceover of the Fink introducing Sonny. Of course, we had to leave Bret and Stone Cold to go to Sonny, and at this point it was not explained why we had to focus on Sonny. That does become clear shortly thereafter. Before we move along to that explanation, however, I have to ask, Ryan, there were a lot of moving parts in this segment. What did you have on the Karate Fighters Tournament, Sonny, and oh yeah, that little insignificant Stone Cold Brian Pillman thing?
To start with the Mr. Perfect stuff, yeah, I don't care that Mr. Perfect was suspended, especially because we know what we know. The karate fighter thing, man, karate fighters must have paid a fucking pretty penny, because this is more than just them mentioning it, that they're sponsoring a segment. This is full on, superstars pushing their product, giving a little promo for karate fighters. So, I mean, props to karate fighters, because they got one hell of a push here. But the segment was a little bit too ham-fisted for my taste, but whatever. You have these things. Unfortunately, it was completely ruined at the end when Petting Zoo ended it with the Toddster. And just, I was done at that point. Done. Then we go to Stone Cold, and there may be some listeners out there that have not watched this. I think it would be odd that this base of people wouldn't have seen this live, but we all know where this is going with Brian Pillman live at his house and Stone Cold pissed off saying he's going to be there. And I thought, again, Stone Cold came in here and just completely made a segment his and We've mentioned in the past that, we're starting to see the signs of the Attitude Era and this and that, but I feel like this episode was like a light switch as we are now in the Attitude Era, especially with Stone Cold. We have multiple segments that are focused on him, backstage stuff happening. I loved it. I thought he was doing a great job here. To go back to what we said earlier, there are signs that he hasn't completely found himself yet, but I'll be damned, he's definitely on his way.
Yeah, the Karate Fighters stuff is basically just a glorified commercial for the toy, but it's terrible because of the Toddster. I kind of wish it was someone else, maybe Doc Hendricks or someone else like that, but unfortunately it's the Toddster. The teasing going into Pillman's house, everybody remembers the Pillman's Got a Gun episode, but I don't remember the teasing going into it. I vaguely remember this small feud that Austin had with Pillman, but I don't remember all this teasing. So that's pretty good stuff building up to that. The interview that Austin's doing here, I guess you call it an interview or a promo, whatever it is pretty good. He's getting mouthy with Vince, and later on it's going to be one of the biggest rivalries of all time. He's calling him a greedy, selfish promoter and calling him a puppet and all that stuff. So that was good stuff. Saying DTA for the first time, we're going to hear that again quite a bit. Then we get Bret Hart on the split screen with his kids. This stuff with Bret is quietly pretty awesome too, because last time you mentioned the cat, he's petting a cat. Now he has his kids. This is like babyface to the max stuff going on. So it's pretty funny. And then the cartoon stripper music hit, and my jaw just hit the fucking floor. I couldn't believe that they cut this off for cartoony stripper music for Sonny. The music sounds so cheesy and bad. I'm wondering if that's like a Peacock edit or if they really were using that. Like, it just sounds so fucking terrible.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. It could be.
And they cut off Bret's interview with it. So that's another reason why it makes me wonder, like, is this the real music they were using, or is Peacock throwing that in and when there's like technical difficulties or something, or it just doesn't jive well with what's going on?
Yeah, I wonder if there was a licensing issue, because wasn't Sonny's perfect entrance music Poison by Alice Cooper? No, I'm just kidding, but I'm pretty sure that song was fucking written about her.
Well, I remember that I Know You Want Me song that we heard before. Like, I thought that was her entrance music, but I guess not.
Nope, it's cartoony stripper music.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what this next episode is going to look like. I distinctly remember watching the Pillman's Got a Gun episode live as it was happening back whenever I was a kid. Yep. And, I'm curious, because there's going to be cartoon shit. There's going to be stripper music in there somewhere. There's going to be a Freddie Joe Floyd jobber match in there somewhere. There's going to be all of this shit in that episode that we completely forgot about. And it's going to be framed around this segment that takes us into a new era of wrestling. Really looking forward to that. Something that I wasn't as much looking forward to, it's a Freddie Joe Floyd jobber match, and it's our next match. Billy Gunn defeats Freddie Joe Floyd by pinfall in 3 minutes and 6 seconds. Yesterday on Superstars was apparently the final straw for the Smoking Guns, as Billy Gunn walked out on Bart. And it was starting to make me wonder if we should be watching Superstars instead of Raw, because on Raw we get Freddie Joe Floyd here. It was clear early on that Sonny was going to be the focus in this match. The camera work was all over the place. It didn't stay on one thing for too long unless that one thing was Sonny. And that was especially once Bart Gunn came down to confront Billy at ringside. The ref could have counted out this match at least 3 times during that confrontation. Freddie Joe Floyd was almost an afterthought in this. I think he got maybe a grand total of 15 seconds of screen time. And that was especially true when we got to the finish. It was looking like Billy was trying for a leg drop from the top turnbuckle, but what it really ended up being was a boot heel brush burn smeared across Freddie Joe Floyd's chest. I think the selling was real on that one, as Billy got the pin and the 3 count. And that's it for this segment. 3 minutes and 6 seconds. I suppose we had to get Sonny finagled in this episode somewhere. At least it wasn't at the expense of a tag team match. Joe, what did you think of this, please?
Well, I hope you boys are ready for Rockabilly. It's coming soon. Yeah, this was a waste of time, really. I mean, it's more of just like we want to do something with Sonny, but we don't know what we're going to do. It seems like Sonny is maybe on something on this appearance because she was talking really fast and really hard to tell what she was saying during this. And normally she's, pretty loud and pretty clear on what she's saying, but this was a little odd.
She was hanging out with Shawn Michaels backstage.
Yeah. Bart comes out and they're still building up to that breakup, but it just seems kind of bland to me. It's just not really that exciting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This was not exciting at all, and we don't pay attention to this match at all. It is just a story about Sonny. I couldn't even really tell you what happened in the match.
Yeah.
I didn't really take any notes other than, as you stated, Bartlett, when Bart came down, the ref could have counted to about 3 minutes. No count out. I really couldn't wrap my head around the no count out here. And then Billy picks up the victory, and Sonny looks at the camera and, continuing with her odd behavior, starts making these like slow licking motions and stuff. And it just reminded me of like a late night TBS 1-900 commercial that they'd played during a Jason Friday the 13th marathon. Just, all around bad shit right here.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but that spot at the beginning when Sonny first came down where, she was flirting with Jerry the King Lawler and she gave him a couple of smooches.
Sat on his lap. Yeah,
sat on his lap. He had the bright red lipstick kiss marks on his forehead and cheek. And it was literally like something out of a cartoon, the way that this ended up looking.
The only thing they could have added was like the smooch sound effect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, less said about that match, the better. Maybe we can talk to Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin now. We go to that same split screen we were at before. Austin was on one side looking contemptuous. Bret was on the other side looking casual and comfortable. And Bret and Stone Cold joust like talking heads going back and forth to start this. Bret starts to give us a little heat when he's talking about whose ass is going to end up being kicked. That's the first time that Bret Hart swears in response to Stone Cold. I thought it was just a neat little glimpse of some fire in Bret Hart's gut. This got a little away from everybody, though, and you could tell they knew what they wanted to do here, but it didn't quite hit the mark. By the time we got to the end, it was mostly just stuttered interruptions. And Joe, this is what I was talking about earlier. This is where it jumped out to me most of all, that Stone Cold knows what he wants to do, but just isn't quite there yet. Stone Cold ends up losing his temper, throws a production assistant through a few ladders as we end this segment. Joe, you could tell that this was unscripted and that Vince, Bret, and Austin were all shooting from the hip, so to speak. And while it was great to see and hear some fire coming from Bret, some of this just felt a little too thrown together and a little too improvised. What did you think of it?
Yeah, and Vince keeps saying live, we're live with Austin and Bret. He says it a million times. So maybe there's like a delay issue too thrown in there for these two guys. But Steve Austin has famously said that the best gimmicks, including his own, was just being himself with the volume turned up to 11, right? Well, the volume's at like 15 here. So, yeah, he's going to dial it back eventually, but, he's going to find that groove.
He's also playing a heel here on top of it still. So.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, it's a lot. It's all really, really quick. Bret Hart, like you said, he threw some heat out there, but he's still staying very cool and calm, which is good. I kind of liked this. I liked this double screen live interview. I thought it was pretty good stuff. Austin's doing this thing where he's trying to get Bret to crack, and Bret's trying to hold back. So I like it. I loved when Austin starts beating up the production assistant. I mean, that's just classic wrestling, hilarious shit, and Vince just freaking out made it even funnier. Like, wait a minute, what is he doing? Just freaking out over Austin beating up this random guy was fucking hilarious.
You know, Joe, you just said about how Austin was trying to get Bret to crack. And that was one of my favorite parts of this was when he finally got Bret to say ass. He was just like, yeah. He was then just pumped that he got him as pumped up, I guess, as he was for this fight. And it does get away from him. As you said, Bartlett, I think that's a perfect way to put it. Or maybe it was you, Joe. He has it dialed up just a little too high here. But I still thought, for the most part, this was a pretty damn entertaining segment between the two. I thought they both did a pretty good job here, especially towards the beginning and the hilarious part at the end where Stone Cold's beating up the production assistant. There's a brief spot in the middle towards the end where it gets a little bit away from Stone Cold, and he's just kind of making noises and interrupting Bret. But for the most part, I thought, again, he kind of took the segment. And I also think this is a clear example of why the WWF right now is desperate for Raw to go to 2 hours, because we're trying to tell these longer storylines. But while doing that, it's going to sacrifice wrestling. You have to have less wrestling to do that. And right now, it's not a very good balance. If we're going to have a bunch of storytelling and interviews, which I'm not saying is bad. That's what made us get deeply involved in wrestling when we were young. But I really think the need to have a longer show is really showing itself now. And it's not going to take them that long to figure that out.
What, you mean you don't enjoy the efficiency of telling the Billy Gunn Sonny story during matches featuring Freddie Joe Floyd?
Exactly.
Yeah, I completely get what you're saying, and I think that it's especially interesting here in this case because this is one of those few instances in WWF storytelling back in this era where we're getting some dedicated storytelling leading up to a match. This isn't just, some shit thrown together at the last minute like what we usually see. There's a significant amount of time being devoted to this, as you stated. I mean, that's what makes a great feud. It's something that we're looking forward to. It's something that we know is going to be good. So it's not like it's wasted time. But at this point, like you say, they either need to dial back on the bullshit, your Sonnies, your stuff like that, and focus a little more on this stuff that's more worthwhile in terms of storytelling. Bret Hart and Steve Austin, Undertaker and Mankind, Sid and Shawn?
Sure.
Yeah, friendship. And speaking of, let's go into our final match of the night. Shawn Michaels with Jose Lothario defeats the British Bulldog with Clarence Mason and Owen Hart by disqualification in 11 minutes and 27 seconds. The backstage issue continues as we got a look at Stone Cold shoving another crew person around back there. And we came back to Shawn's entrance. Shawn was looking a little disjointed to me here at the very start. Not anything I could quite put my finger on. But at the start, we also found out that Owen was going to be joining commentary. I was looking forward to hearing what he may have to say about some things. Starting next week, Raw is going to be starting 1 hour earlier at 7 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. We'll see if that changes anything with the show format moving forward. I'm not sure how long that's going to last. Not too long, I don't think, but there was not a given reason as to why, was there? Or did I miss that?
I didn't hear any reason.
Yeah. Well, back in the match here, I loved Owen praising the Bulldog for being humble and not posing for the crowd while the Bulldog was posing for the crowd. Good shit, pal. Shawn was looking a little sloppy in the ring at first, and I'm not sure if that was just bias on my part or not. Maybe I was subconsciously remembering Sonny's behavior earlier. I don't know, but there was a pretty good chunk of time wasted while the Bulldog walked out and Shawn posed, and the Bulldog hid from the crowd chanting HBK. The crowd got going with an HBK chant, and the Bulldog just kind of cowered in the corner. I couldn't even think of words for it. Just, ugh. McMahon informed us that the cops had been called for Stone Cold in the backstage area just as Shawn was landing a great enziguri that the Bulldog sold perfectly. We broke for commercial. We got classy Freddie Blassie listening to WWF Full Metal with some kid. Made me think of you, Joe, the story you were telling us about the real metal people contributing to that album. When we came back from that commercial, Shawn Michaels was attempting a rally. The action started to not look too bad here. The match continued. Michaels looked less sloppy over time. The Bulldog still looked good throughout. There were multiple updates from Vince McMahon on the backstage situation. First, the cops were called, then backup got called. I'm sure this is the only time that the cops will ever be called on Stone Cold Steve Austin. He will learn his lesson after this. After another commercial break, we came back to Michaels and the Bulldog wearing down. That is, until Michaels caught his second wind and began his newest rally. This started the ending of the match, and as things wound down, Shawn was starting to look a little winded in the setup for the flying elbow. Shawn was waiting to deliver sweet chin music after that. Owen got up to interfere, drawing the DQ finish as the tag champs started beating on Shawn Michaels. But then Psycho Sid came out to rescue Shawn, which Shawn didn't like for some reason at first. Michaels and Sid started yelling at each other, but then we get reminded of friendship. Owen Hart, out of nowhere, challenges Sid and Shawn to a tag team match with the tag team titles on the line. Probably one of the stupidest things I've heard in a very long time, considering there was no reason to make this challenge for the titles at all. We ended our episode with a view of the police escorting Stone Cold Steve Austin out of the building, with the inference here being that Stone Cold was in some kind of legal trouble for his behavior. This was such a typical ending for Raw here. You know, a decent match that was dragged down at the end by confusing storytelling with Sid and then the tag titles, but then also some more of the backstage scenes we've been getting more and more of lately. Ryan, what did you think about our final match and the way that Raw ended tonight?
I thought as far as the match went, this was a pretty good way to end Raw. I mean, you have Shawn Michaels and the British Bulldog, two headline superstars to finish you out. And for the most part, they delivered here. It started out a little bit slow, especially at the beginning. They finally did get going after all of the entrances. Then immediately the Bulldog's out of the ring and they waste a little more time. But once we got through that, I thought the action was pretty great. And having Owen here at ringside on commentary, I think was good as well. Owen Hart definitely could have had a career in commentary if the, terrible tragedy wouldn't have happened for him. After he had to retire from the ring, he definitely could have made it in commentary because he's entertaining. The match is exactly what we expected, though. Bulldog and Shawn Michaels, they deliver for most of the match here, but at the end, we have to do a safe ending that is going to save face for both people. So Owen comes in for the predictable disqualification, and then the clusterfuck. Sid comes down, a bit of a fight, and I could only assume because Owen wanted to make sure their friendship didn't end, offered them a shot at the tag team belts. He just was very dedicated to their friendship. And then Stone Cold with the cops, a familiar scene moving forward. So entertaining match all around, but hobbled a little bit with too many antics at the end.
Yeah, I didn't really notice Shawn's entrance because I was too focused on Vince McMahon's orgasm during that entrance. You talk about electricity. You talk about resilience. You better talk about Shawn Michaels. I mean, he just loses his mind during this intro. I thought the match was pretty good. Not a 5-star match, but I thought it was pretty good. This is the type of match that these guys should have been having on those pay-per-views, not the shit shows that they gave us when they had their pay-per-view matches, especially the Beware of Dog match. So I will take this match over that one any day. Owen Hart on commentary I thought was fantastic. And I loved the challenge at the end, what that Owen makes. I thought it was Sid and Shawn are fighting, and Owen basically says, "Hey, why don't you two quit fighting? If you got the guts, why don't you face us next week?" And I thought that was cool. That's some shit I can get behind, not fucking wild man Mark Marrow coming out and putting his title on the line against Triple H. You know, like, this to me was a little better than that. And the Stone Cold Steve Austin stuff with the cops I thought was hilarious because, again, it's him just throwing around these people, these people backstage. Earlier it was the production assistant, and now it's these Paul Blart rent-a-cops. It's great.
All right. Well, as I said, that was the end of our episode. So let's take it on over now to highlights and lowlights. Joe, why don't you go first?
Well, my highlight is just everything with Stone Cold Steve Austin. I think that this was an episode that really just highlighted Stone Cold Steve Austin. Unfortunately, we had some garbage in between, but at least we had, 3 or 4 segments with him to brighten this show. My low light is going to be the Crush and Aldo Montoya match. I just think that nobody needs to see a match between those two ever. I cannot understand why Aldo Montoya gets the entrance that he gets.
My highlight is going to fall in line with you, Joe. Just Stone Cold in general is the highlight. Just about every segment he was in, he stole, and pretty much this entire Raw was to shine a spotlight on Stone Cold, and it worked. Low light, this may come as a shock since we did have Crush in this episode, and I wanted to go with them. I did, but the Billy Gunn match, it just squeaked it out. It was just that bad, trying to just shoehorn in Sonny and just paying attention to nothing. It took the low light for me.
Yeah, I am going to be mirroring you on your low light there, Ryan. I came close with Crush and Aldo Montoya, but because I was able to type out the note, the heart punch was applied directly to the forehead. That salvaged that one for me. And this whole Sonny and Billy Gunn thing, Sonny continues to be the most uninteresting story in the entire WWF right now.
But she looks good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Looks great.
That's all that matters.
Single most uninteresting story.
It's amazing. Someone that looks so good. These creative geniuses can't figure anything out for her.
Except for that cartoony stripper music. That was a stroke of genius.
Yeah.
I'm going to differ with you guys on my highlight, though. Stone Cold definitely was a highlight of this episode, but he's going to be a highlight a ton moving forward. So I'm going to try to moderate how many times I use him. But something that I picked up on in this episode that makes me very excited is the news that there are going to be big changes with Farouk. That's my highlight. Hopefully no more gladiator thing, no more helmet, no more any of that shit.
But you did see that they updated his helmet yet again, didn't you? In that picture?
Yeah, didn't it have speed holes now?
Yeah, yep, it's got speed holes.
Speed holes make Farouk go faster. Well, Joseph, do you have any contemporary wrestling news from on and around October 28th, 1996 for us?
I sure do. Do you guys ever remember hearing that Hulk Hogan, his contract with WCW was expiring around this time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he was talking with Vince McMahon to try to come back, but I think it was just trying to build some leverage with WCW. And Hulk Hogan signed a new 3-year deal with WCW. And guess who else has signed with WCW recently? Roddy Piper.
Oh, that had to hit Vince in the balls.
Uh-huh. He has signed with WCW. He appeared at the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view and appears to be challenging Hollywood Hulk Hogan. So, some interesting things about this episode. Some questions may have been running through your brain as you watched this episode, especially with the Stone Cold Steve Austin stuff. Dave Meltzer is reporting that Raw is officially moving up 1 hour. Vince actually mentioned that as well on this episode. But that's going to be a permanent thing. They're moving the show from 9 p.m. to 8 p.m. And in addition, Raw is going to be doing its key angles live in studio or via satellite each week, working the taped matches around the angle. So all of this stuff with Stone Cold Steve Austin was live, and then they threw in the taped matches around it. And that is going to be a format that Monday Night Raw is going to try to follow.
Well, that's fucking interesting, man.
I see it as kind of a taint tickler to going full-blown live in what, a few months? I think it's, February?
Yeah.
Maybe,
so.
or
End of February.
Yeah, so maybe that's kind of what they're doing, kind of testing the waters. Bad news on Brian Pillman. He had ankle surgery again on October 23rd. His ankle did not heal properly from the first surgery, so they had to re-break his ankle.
Jesus.
And start from scratch. It's being reported that it'll be at least 6 months before he can even think about coming back to wrestling, so that is unfortunate. A couple other injuries. Barry Windham and Vader both suffered broken foots.
Ugh.
Barry Windham broke his at a house show, and Vader broke his while working with Jake Roberts at a Boy Meets World filming.
Oh, I remember when he was on there.
Yes.
When I remember Vader being on there, at least.
Yeah, well, he hurt his foot. Speaking of Vader, the original plan was to have Vader beat Sid at Buried Alive and then have Vader beat Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series, but that plan has obviously changed.
Yeah. Thankfully.
Thankfully, yes. Another injury report, Savio Vega, his injury turned out to be a torn calf muscle. Not sure how bad that tear is, but
sounds painful.
Who knows when we'll see Savio back. But Ahmed Johnson, he is expected to be back in December. So hopefully we'll get him back here soon. And that is all.
All right. Looking forward to Ahmed coming back and that list of injuries doubling. That's it, folks. We are done with this one. I want to thank you again for joining us. If you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can email us at WRASSLINRAW. Just add @gmail.com to the end of that to submit questions or comments. And check us out on social media and on every podcast subscription platform. While you're there, don't forget to follow and subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review. Let your friends know how much cooler they would be if they became Rawheads like you and me. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at the Raw that aired on November 4th, 1996, with matches featuring The Sultan, Fake Razor, and many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.